Every year, an increasing number of people kick gluten out of their diet, and there are plenty of good reasons to do so. Some people are simply intolerant, a good example being celiac disease, but for others, gluten can make them feel sluggish, it can make it hard for them to control their weight, it can cause them brain fog, or even trigger a range of gastrointestinal issues. Whatever your reason may be, we're lucky to live in a day and age where there are so many gluten-free options available at restaurants and in the grocery stores. There are also endless gluten-free recipes online, and any ingredients you may need for these recipes can be shipped right to your front door. With all the advancements in today's food production, however, there come some downsides. It can be hard to understand or trace all the ingredients in your food, and in some cases, you could be consuming gluten without even knowing it. Maybe you're thinking, why do I not feel 100% when I completely cut out gluten? And the whole process of avoiding your favorite foods is frustrating enough. Well, the reality is gluten is actually hiding in some everyday foods that you simply would have no idea. So today I want to go over 10 super common foods that you would never expect to contain gluten. We'll cover each one in depth. We'll discuss ways to avoid them, especially when you aren't the one preparing the food. And if you stick around to the end, we'll cover some foods that actually can reverse some of the intestinal damage that gluten may have caused you. Starting from the bottom of my list at number 10, you'll want to rethink gluten-removed beers. So gluten-removed sounds promising, but it's pretty far from being gluten-free. Similarly to how decaf coffee still has a bit of caffeine in it, gluten-removed means that the final product contains less than 20 parts per million of gluten, which could be a lot depending on your level of sensitivity. You are definitely better off drinking beers in which every ingredient used from the start of the brewing process all the way to bottling is completely gluten-free. And true gluten-free beers are brewed with less traditional grains such as rice, buckwheat, or sorghum. They do, however, tend to be a bit more pricey, so if you don't want to break the bank, you can opt for hard ciders, seltzers, or spirits. In every case, though, you'll want to know all of the ingredients involved throughout the brewing process. Number 9, cheesecake. This can be a pretty popular dessert for the gluten-free eater, especially if you're thinking, I'll just avoid the crust, which obviously can contain gluten. One thing to look out for that few people are aware of is that many cheesecake recipes call for a wheat-based filling that helps get the desired texture and thickness. You'll definitely want to ask your waiter or waitress before ordering cheesecake next time you're at a restaurant, and if you're making it at home, it's probably best to make the filling from scratch, but if not, definitely double check that you've picked up a gluten-free mix. Number 8 might take you off guard, eggs. Now before you start to panic, this has a lot more to do with eggs served at restaurants as opposed to when you're cracking them in your pan at home. You're probably wondering how this is even possible since gluten is a plant-based protein while eggs are obviously an animal-based protein. Well, the truth is that some restaurants will sneak things such as pancake batter into your omelet or your scrambled eggs. This helps deliver a fluffier texture and add a little bit of extra flavor. So this is another item to clarify with your waiter or waitress during your next brunch outing, or if you want to play it safe, you can just order your eggs poached, fried, or sunny side up. Back to desserts for number 7, malt milkshakes. Aside from cross-contamination issues, an obvious first thing to think about is added ingredients, such as the cookies in a cookies and cream flavor. But most importantly, there's a big difference between milkshakes and malts. Milkshakes that are milk and ice cream based are okay, but when it comes to malts, a third ingredient is involved, which is malted milk powder. Two key elements in malted milk powder are malted barley and wheat flour. Therefore, malts are quite far from being gluten-free. Moving on to number 6, potato chips. Potatoes in their natural state do not contain gluten, however several of your favorite chip flavors actually might. Closer inspection of the ingredients label can reveal things such as malt vinegar or wheat starch. And a great example of a potato-based chip that contains gluten is Pringles. I'm happy to report that the majority of your potato chips are typically acceptable, but you should always check for that certified gluten-free label. And making your own potato chips at home with your own seasonings can be a fun alternative to sprucing up your lunch. Staying on the topic of lunch, number 5 is processed lunch meats. When you're making a gluten-free sandwich, your mind is probably just focused on the bread on the outside. However, gluten could be hiding in those packaged deli meats. Different seasonings and binding agents are regularly added to these meats for flavor, texture, and preservation purposes, and some of these ingredients can be derived from rye, barley, or wheat. For this reason and other non-gluten related ones, cooking a whole turkey or a chicken, cutting it up, and using that for your sandwiches is a much better option. Or more conveniently, you could pick up a rotisserie chicken, you'll want unseasoned of course, and cut that up to use instead. Sort of on the same topic, number 4 is imitation meats. In the world of vegetarian or vegan substitutes, one really common imitation meat you have surely seen, and maybe you've overlooked, is called seitan. Seitan does a great job of imitating a chicken-like taste and texture, but it is made entirely out of wheat gluten. If you find yourself avoiding meat, tofu or black beans are always a great option, or you could go for vegetables that are high in plant protein, like peas, spinach, kale, broccoli, or mushrooms. Vegetables like these bring us to our next item, number 3, soups. Of course, pasta-based soups like chicken noodle or chicken orzo naturally include gluten, but we're here to warn you about some less obvious ones. We've found that heavier, creamier soups sometimes use wheat or flour to create that preferred thick texture. Soups that don't will usually identify themselves with the gluten-free label, but it's important to always check the ingredients list in case any grain byproducts are present. Maybe you prefer salads instead of soups? Well, look out for number 2, salad dressing. Unless you're making your own or buying it from a specific store, there's a good chance that you're flavoring your greens with a gluten-based salad dressing. Gluten is a really common ingredient because it helps bring out the flavor and give a more enriching taste. A lot of dressings will say it contains wheat on the label, but if not, be sure to scan the list for mentions of wheat, rye, or barley. This especially applies to those salad dressing packets of dry mix. Lastly, number 1, soy sauce. As you probably know, many people dip sushi or rice into soy sauce, but it's also a base for other sauces like teriyaki. And wheat is actually a key ingredient in soy sauce, and although the gluten proteins are broken down during the fermentation process, there are still very small gluten particles present. Depending on your sensitivity, soy sauce could be aggravating your gluten-related symptoms. A really great alternative to soy sauce is tamari, which is made with soybeans instead of wheat. Hopefully this has helped you piece together some things and understand why maybe you've still reacted to foods that you thought were gluten-free. And now that you've conquered that first step of cutting out gluten, you can focus on the much more difficult task of reversing the damage that has already been done to your gut. And since you've stuck around this long, let's finish off by briefly discussing 5 foods that are not just gluten-free, but they can actually help repair your gut. Before we jump in, if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to subscribe so we can continue helping you harness your health. So here we go, 5 foods that can reverse your gut damage. The first is fermented foods, such as sauerkraut, kimchi, or miso. This is because fermented foods contain a lot of probiotics. These will help your overall digestion and ensure that you have proper amounts of stomach acid and pancreatic enzymes. Second up, we have wild-caught seafood. You'll want to avoid seafood that is farm-raised because of the presence of antibiotics, which are really hard on your gut. When you buy only wild-caught seafood, you get the full range of healthy minerals, proteins, and omega-3 fatty acids. Third up, we have organic bone broth. Bone broth has a wide range of nutrients, and most importantly, has a lot of healthy amino acids. One of these is glutamine, and glutamine is super important for rebuilding your intestinal walls. Next up, we have coconut products, such as your coconut oil, coconut milk, or coconut flour. These are all high in MCTs, which can reduce inflammation and solidify the gut lining. Not only that, but they are also high in lauric acid, which helps kill off harmful bacteria. Last but not least, apple cider vinegar. The main benefit is the increase in stomach acid production to help break down your food and gather all the nutrients. The taste can be a bit rough, but next time you're about to take an antacid, try drinking a bit of this instead. Thanks for sticking around. If our next video is up, you can check it out right here. Make sure you leave a comment below, let us know that you've subscribed, or tell us if there are any topics you'd like us to cover in the future. I'll be sure to respond to each and every one of you.